Morning, everyone. I'm Ursula Wojciechowska. I'm the chair of the Women in World Trade. We are a community of women that are passionate about international trade. We support each other in our business endeavors, and we would love to welcome you into our group. Please keep an eye on our website for our future programming. And with that, I would like to hand over to Dawn Weaver, who's our Vice President, who's going to run our program today.
Hello, everyone. We are really happy that you're with us today. We have a great turnout. I think that, as Ursula said, we are growing our network exponentially, and I think that's proof of that, as well as, you know, the topic at hand in the webinar today is of great interest, I think, to most people who are involved in international trade. So I, in particular, want to thank the Canadian Consulate for joining us today. They've put a lot of effort into their presentation. So we're going to be gaining insight and expertise from them into a diversity of subject matters dealing with trade between Canada and the US, investing, trade itself, industry specific, strategic partnering as our allies, and of course our #1 trading partners. So we're going to start right away because we have a pretty full schedule. And today we have the honor of hearing from the Consul General, and we're super pleased about that. Rodger Trueman Cuzner was first elected to the House of Commons in November 2000 as the Member of Parliament for Bras-d'Or. You guys are going to make me speak my really bad French in Cape Breton. I was actually looking that up last night, and it looks really pretty. I need to go there. So Rodger was elected in 5 subsequent elections before his retirement in 2019. And during his 19 years in Ottawa, Rodger served in several roles, including Parliamentary Secretary to former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, Chief Opposition Whip, and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Human Resources and Skills Development. In his early years in Parliament, Rodger focused on matters surrounding both veteran affairs and fisheries and oceans. And more recently, much of his attention was directed towards workforce development, which is a big issue for all of us now, and national labor issues. He is an elected official, as an elected official, he represented the beautiful and iconic Northern Nova Scotia and Cape Breton Island, working with the community and industry to build and mature the tourism sector. So you were all over the place. Major investments in infrastructure contributed to this growth, notably 2 of the top-rated golf courses in the world, Cabot Lincoln and Cabot Cliffs. And prior to his appointment, Rodger worked in the private sector as senior advisor at Rubicon Strategies in Ottawa. So we're so pleased to have you here today. And with that, I'll let you give your presentation.
Well, thanks very much. Listen, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I appreciate the invite, Ursula and Don and Faye. If the banter before we went live is any indication, this should be a fun presentation today anyway. Women in trade, and I've had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about your group over the past while. I remember having a conversation with some representatives back last spring, and we said, well, we'll look forward to meeting in the summer or and then maybe the fall. And so finally we're doing this online, and hopefully down the road we will be able to actually be live and in person. It's been just a little bit better than a year since I arrived here in New England. It was January 6th of last year. There wasn't a lot of hoopla around my arrival. Something else was going on that sort of took up a lot of the airwaves. But you know, it's been a great chance to meet some very smart, engaged, positive, insightful people that want to do good and do good in business, and so that's been super. I think we in Canada we very much align with the folks in New England. That shouldn't come as a surprise. You know, in the wake of the Second World War and in the 50s, so many Canadians had come down this way. I know Atlantic Canadians. Folks from Quebec had come down and established roots, and we, you know, now their descendants are contributing to those communities and the wealth of these communities. Just a quick note, I was down about 10 years ago on a hockey trip. My son was playing hockey down here. We had a hotel room booked in Watertown, and so we were trying to find. I couldn't find the turn off to the hotel. I ran a yellow light, got stopped by the police. Luckily, as the conversation went on, the police officer, I find out that his dad was born in Cape Breton, on Cape Breton Island in Cheticamp. And I said, well, you know, that's part of my federal district. I'm a member of parliament, and that's part of my federal district. And he said, my uncle Bruno owns Mr. Chicken in Cheticamp. I said, geez, I know Bruno as well. So we got a police escort back to the hotel. And so that worked well. But I think, you know, it speaks, probably gives you some kind of indication as to how deep the roots are here, and why there's such a symmetry, and we align on so many issues. Since arriving, I've had the great opportunity to get to work with the staff at the consul office, in particular the trade team here. We are broad and deep in skills, and broad and deep in experience. I'm going to hand off shortly to Dina Santos, our Senior Trade Commissioner, but who's just come in from Dallas and was in San Francisco before that, and across the pond before that. And we are there to help in any way we can. And hopefully, you know, today's presentation will be able to plant some seeds, and we'll be able to continue our relationship beyond that. Next slide, Faye, if you could. Now, I'm sure the first thing you think of is, my God, you Canadian men are good looking. And we hear that a lot. I don't myself, but I'm sure some do. I had the opportunity to serve with our current Prime Minister from 2008 till I finished up in 2019. He's a good person. At his core, he's a good person. He's a principled leader. He believes in equity and diversity and inclusion. He holds if anybody pays much attention to what's going on north of the border, he is absolutely committed to reconciliation with their Indigenous people. He knows that you don't do that overnight. You know, 150 years of not getting it right, you don't fix that overnight. So, but he's very much committed to it. And that pathway to reconciliation, it's a tough one, but we continue to pursue that. Same with the, you know, if you look at the environment, it's very similar. We're a nation that has long exported fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, and they've been a key cornerstone of our economy for so many years. We understand fully that we have a responsibility for the environment, and we're committed to that. But again, it's a process, and we have an aggressive approach. I think it aligns very much with the new administration in Washington, but we have an aggressive approach, and I'm proud of where we are heading. You know, we just had an election last fall in Canada, and each of the major parties had strong positions on the environment. The other thing that he's very much committed to is he considers himself a feminist. You know, the cynics out there might mock him on that, but he is absolutely committed to women's role in business and in politics and in leadership roles. We've seen that through his cabinet, each cabinet that he's appointed since 2015. They've been gender balanced with men and women, and no token positions. He has put women in some of the most senior and key posts. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is the current finance minister. Melanie Joly is foreign affairs minister. Mary Ng is international trade. Anita Anand, she's just been appointed in this cabinet as Minister of Defense, and she was the Minister of Procurement through the early stages of COVID and did an exceptional job. But it doesn't stop at the ministerial level. You know, for example, in defense, he's very passionate about growing the number of women in our armed forces. He knows that when we go on peacekeeping missions throughout the world, especially in Africa, some of the atrocities are actually committed by some of the forces that are sent in there to peacekeep. And that's because, you know, there are men from other countries that don't understand the impact of their actions. So we believe that we can play a larger role, especially in peacekeeping in some of these very difficult places around the globe, if we have a higher number of women in the forces. And that's been very much the focus of the forces, and it will be under this new minister. Our Governor General, Mary Simon, she's an Indigenous woman serving in the role as Governor General. 3 of our 9 Supreme Court judges are women, and we've just Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin has just retired, and so again, you know, his commitment to gender balance and gender equity is, I think it's the real deal. It's not just talk, but he's working toward it. Faye, let's try the next one. You know, we want to take the feminist agenda outside our borders as well, and we think that that's important, and we're strong advocates. In the last administration, I know after he came in, the president had put together a number of advisory boards. He had a strategic policy forum that was headed up by Steve Schwartzman from Blackstone and Larry Fink from BlackRock. He put together a manufacturing council, and there were advisory councils in those sectors, and they sort of came and went. They were dissolved in about 5 months or something, but wrapped around the first bilateral meeting that the Prime Minister Trudeau and President Trump had, they put together an advisory group, and I'll read the name. It's the Canada-US Council for Advancement of Women Entrepreneurs and Business Leaders. Now, obviously, you know, that moniker was thought out by a senior male bureaucrat somewhere that had no self-awareness and thought that he was great at branding with that catchy little number. But it was on the urging of Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, that and although those other advisory boards went by the wayside, this particular advisory board continued to work and present briefs and recommendations to both the White House and to the Prime Minister's office. Some great stuff came out of that, and those reports are available online, but some great recommendations. I think in the first one, the push for childcare, and you know, with a comprehensive approach to broad-based access to childcare. It was something that was featured in the last election, in the government's platform in the last election. I know President Biden and Build Back Better, one of the focal points of that legislation is access to childcare. And, you know, we talked about just before we came on about labor force needs and labor force, the impacts on labor force, and how COVID has impacted labor force. If we want to unlock the potential of the labor force, there's no single better way to do it than with helping women get back in the labor force and unlock the potential of that labor force. So anyway, we believe it's a message that as Canadians we'll continue to try to advocate. Let's go to the next one and see if I got anything to say about that. Okay. Oh, This is our integrated North American burger. Okay, and if there's any misconceptions about just how interconnected we are with supply chains and with the trade between the two countries. When you look at this burger, I think it tells it. I'd say this is probably a quarter pounder here, but when you see that the baked bun comes from Ontario, the beef and that's 100% prime Alberta beef, cheese from the States, ketchup from Ontario, lettuce from Quebec, tomatoes from Mexico, mustard from the US. That's what lands on your plate. I like to use the reference about in the auto sector. The auto sector is so interrelated. They say that a part that's built in Mexico or the US will cross into Canada, be added to or finished. We're pretty much an intermediate level manufacturer in Canada. It'll come back into the States. That part will cross the border 6 to 8 times. And if you refer to it as an industrial tourist, by the time that car lands on the showroom floor, that car will have 8 bad t-shirts, like any other tourist who buys a t-shirt when they cross a border. But just to sort of state the obvious, that in the auto sector, as in many other sectors, it's a North American market as opposed to a Canadian market or a US market. It's a North American market versus European or Asian. And that's why, we're concerned about the executive order around electric vehicles and the rebates for electric vehicles. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to bring that to light and address that over our time. But anyway, I think this is where I hand it off to our Senior Trade Commissioner, Dina Santos.
Thank you, Rodger. Yes, thank you so much. Faye, next slide, please. Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you at lunchtime. So hamburger didn't stir too much of your, in any event, I just wanted to introduce our team. Basically, we're part of Global Affairs Canada, the Trade Commissioner Service segment. And we are the counterparts of the State Department here in the US. We're 125 years old. And we basically have about 160 offices worldwide, staffed with over 1,000 trade commissioners. And our main goal is to support Canadian companies doing business internationally, particularly SMEs. So because of the importance of the Canada-US relationship, in addition to our Canadian Embassy in DC, we have 13 Canadian consulates across the US supporting Canadian business development efforts in the region. So we here in Boston covered the New England states, except for Connecticut. Our services are free of charge to Canadian companies that have, or American companies that have meaningful ties to Canada and a capacity to internationalize. Faith, next slide, please. Perfect. So basically, what do we do? So we are, the way that we market ourselves through our Canadian clients is that we're an enhancement of the business development of their business development teams looking for business opportunities abroad. We're free and confidential. And as part of our 1,000 officer network, we tend to hire a lot of trade commissioners that are with local expertise. So we're so pleased to have Erin and Carolyn as part of our team. And you've probably also interacted with other women members of our team, such as Colette Leckborg and Lisa Carrier. But we basically hire them because we want to deep dive into their business knowledge of markets and contacts, and try to take on their feedback and expertise in terms of the advice that they can give around right strategies to adopt for the US market. We expect Canadian companies to operate abroad responsibly, lawfully, and meeting Canadian environmental and social standards. We also provide some financing programs to support our Canadian clients going abroad. And Canada is very much an export nation. So in essence, I'm not sure if you know this, but 2/3 of our economy is supported by international exports, and 3.3 jobs are based on our export efforts abroad. So we're very much a trading nation, which explains the myriad of free trade agreements and market access that we continually negotiate on behalf of our Canadian companies. Next slide, please. So why Canada? So we're getting into the juice of our presentation today on how the reasons why you should consider doing business in Canada. So as of 2021, Canada's labor participation rate has recovered to pre-pandemic levels. We did have a lot of inflation, just like here in the US, in the later part of 2021. It rose to 4.7%, but it was still below the US average of 6.8%. And you know, we are really lining up here with our, based on our international trade policies to set up the best environment to do business among G7 countries in the next 5 years. We're social progress leaders. Our economy is expected to grow 4.9% in 2022. We have a low cost, low tax environment, and that's something that is not necessarily known. Like I have to say, in terms of a myth, you always think that Canada is, is a social, has very strong social policies. So we must tax individuals and corporations quite highly. But at the end of the day, in terms of our corporate tax, we have a combined corporate tax rate of 26%, which is lower than the one that is currently in place in the US. And we have many tax deductions and accelerated investment amortization programs. So my colleague Carolyn's going to talk about this a little bit further in the presentation, but I just wanted to highlight that. And then we're very strong. I mean, we support research and development extensively in Canada. We have about 60% of our population that has a post-secondary education. And just referencing our free trade agreements, we're going to be deep diving into them a little bit more, but we have free trade agreements with about 15 countries and regional blocks, which gives us preferential access to 2/3 of the world's population. And I just want to mention, because there was a question, I'm sure that you would be interested in learning more about the free trade agreements that Canada has that compared to the US. And, two major free trade agreements include that the US has not completed negotiations on, relate to our market access to Europe. So we signed a free trade agreement with Europe called CETA a couple of years ago. And before we signed that agreement, tariffs of goods being sold to the EU were exempt. We had 25% of tariff exemptions of goods being sold to the EU. The agreement got our Canadian companies to benefit from 98% of tariff exemption to sell into that market. And we also, we negotiated open procurement markets. So we also have access to about $3.3 billion of EU procurement opportunities. So this is a good strategy. We're going to deep dive on this a little bit later in the presentation, but certainly this is a great reason for companies like yours to set up operations in Canada to take advantage of those benefits. And, obviously the UK exited through Brexit, their European Union, but the day that Brexit came into place, that we actually signed also a free trade agreement with the UK, which basically extends the same benefits that we have under the CETA free trade agreement to Canadian companies wanting to export to the UK. So I just thought that was interesting. That was interesting to highlight. And, we speak a lot of languages. There's over 200 languages in Canada, including 60 nation languages. So, that definitely in terms of your international. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we just wanted to highlight that, our country is on its way. Of course, we were as affected by the pandemic as the United States was, but we definitely, compared to the rest of G7 countries, on our way to great economic recovery fundamentals. And I already mentioned this before, but we do anticipate a good growth rate for Canada in the next few years compared to other G7 countries, and we're a highly vaccinated country. Next slide, please. So this is where I pass on the presentation to my colleague, Carolyn McAfee. She leads, she's our officer responsible for our investment attraction efforts at the consulate. So Carolyn, over to you.
Thank you, Dina. I saw a question in the or a comment in the chat box which said, is this doing business with Canada, this webinar? Yes, it is. And we have both directions. When we talk about doing business with Canada, we mean trade and investment. And as Dina said, I'm responsible for the investment, meaning we work with US companies, in our case, because we're situated in Boston, with New England companies who either want to start or grow their business in Canada. And beyond the 6 pillars that Dina had already mentioned, why Canada, there is one that stands out, and it's always been that way, but it has certainly been accelerated or enhanced through the pandemic, and that's the demand for skills. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to say anything new to anybody on the webinar here, but skills is something that drives both trade and investment. And both Canada and the US are knowledge-based and innovation-driven societies. So one of the things that we can highlight is not only that Canada has a wealth of talent, so when you look at the numbers, and we have some more detailed slides later on as well, but if you look at the numbers of the talent pipeline in Canada, it's tremendous. And that is anything from the languages that Dina mentioned, but also tech orientation and diversity. And since we're in the Women for Trade association here, this is one thing that we don't want to neglect, how important that diversity is. Obviously, I'm also not telling you anything new, that when we talk about the highly skilled talent, we are in a crunch time in the US, around the world, but also sometimes in Canada. And one of the things that Canada has done is look at this talent pipeline strategically. So in 2017, the Canadian government introduced the Global Skills Strategy. What that means is a set of tools for companies that are looking to do business with Canada or in Canada, to sort of go beyond or cut the red tape when it comes to finding the right talent. And I don't want to go too much into detail here, but what it includes is really the speed of granting work permit exemptions, to prioritizing highly skilled occupations, to creating a dedicated service channel, meaning you basically, if you are a company hiring in Canada, you have an account manager, and then you also have an expedited stream for those work permits. Now, having said that, obviously, we all are looking, not just the IRS in the US, but in general, we're looking at backlog that was caused by the pandemic. So we would, before pandemic, we would say, you know what, it takes you 2 weeks. You make that decision to hire, it takes you 2 weeks, and you can have that employee at your desk in Canada. We're not doing that right now. So we want to be honest and transparent. So those 2 weeks are pre-pandemic. We're looking post-pandemic or at the end of the pandemic, hopefully. Currently, we're looking at about 6 weeks. Having said that, that's still really fast. So we're really proud of the abilities and having, this is the one point that I really want to stress on this slide, having a strategy around immigration to add value for Canada, but also for those US companies that want to do business in or with Canada. Next slide, please. So this is another one, and It's a very busy slide, I realize that, but it's one of those that touches on everything that enables investment in Canada, that enables US companies to work with Canada. Dina already mentioned global market access with 15 trade agreements. The 200 languages were spoken, but even geographically, when you look at the transport connectivity here on this slide, it is amazing how centralized Canada is and becomes a North American hub. And so when we talk about supply chains, and I think that's something we might want to touch on later, but when we talk about supply chains that have been disrupted throughout the pandemic, this is certainly something for US companies to look at, keyword nearshoring, because of the connectivity that Canada has to offer. When you look at that eastern corner of Canada in Newfoundland, you have a shorter distance between there and Europe than you have from Boston to the West Coast. Just keep that in mind. That makes it pretty graphic, as in that's really centralized access to global markets here. Next slide. I think, Rodger, I'm going to hand it off to you again here.
Okay, listen, it's an audio-visual extravaganza we have here. Just touching on, I guess, coming off the comments that Dina had made about Canada's position and the trade agreements that we have in place. And I think where it's advantageous to corporate USA and American investors is the trade agreements that we do have in place. CETA that was signed with the EU, and of course the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTP. That takes in 20 countries. Australia, Japan, South Korea, big trading nations. I know that myself, I had an opportunity to go to Italy back a number of years ago on a trade mission with parliamentarians. And in Italy, we met with a seat manufacturer that does a fair amount of work with Bombardier out of Quebec. And they wanted to do further investment and in Canada and establish a business in Canada so that they would have access to the American market and be able to get in on some work with Boeing, and so we're sort of seen as that launch pad coming and going for those countries that are in the CTPP and the CETA trade deal as well. So I think that that's of benefit coming both ways. So we'll go to the next slide, Faye.
This is one of those slides that I was mentioning earlier, where for those who are interested to dive a little bit deeper into details, and particularly in comparison to other countries. As you can see here, Canada, not only is it in red, but it's also leading. And you put it right next to Japan, Luxembourg, South Korea, US. I think it speaks for itself that Canada has one of the world's best educated workforces. We don't want to dive deeper here. Just to name three, and you're probably all familiar with those: University of Toronto, McGill, BC, British Columbia. Those are sort of leading R&D universities in Canada that have a huge exchange and cross-border activity, anything from R&D partnerships to international student exchanges with the US. Next slide, please. Which leads us right next to this one here, tech talent. I can't emphasize that enough. It doesn't matter whether you call it tech talent or STEM. If you include diversity, these are numbers that are particularly important when we talk about progress or rebuilding, recovery, innovation. Any of that is really built on the tech talent pipeline in North America, but particularly we're pointing out here the leadership that the metropolitan areas in Canada are occupying. And needless to say, Toronto is #1 there. That talent pipeline is growing, has been growing from 2016 to 2020, which the numbers are here showing, but it's only getting bigger and better. Next slide, please. And back to you, Rodger.
Well, the CUSMA, we refer to it as CUSMA, but USMCA, obviously it's it's been of benefit to both countries, huge benefit to both countries. Back before NAFTA was signed, there used to be $40 billion annually in trade. You know, that's gone up to 1.2 trillion through NAFTA, and now, you know, with new CUSMA regulations, it keeps pretty much the it keeps pretty much the same elements of NAFTA in place. 99% of the goods, there are no tariffs on 99% of the goods. There are irritants, and there'll always be irritants, and like any neighbors who play their music too loud or some, I guess we'd be accused of that. But we work through them, and you know, softwood lumber has been a concern for 120 years. Dairy has, you know, has been a concern, but we are such great neighbors that we, you know, we find a way to get things done, and for the most part, it's been, you know, it's a friendship and a partnership and a relationship that has brought so much benefit to both great countries, and we continue to work to make that relationship strong and deep.
So I think you heard from Rodger a bit earlier about this current Canadian administration's commitment to gender equity, to gender parity. That's really flowed down to our department in Global Affairs and the Trade Commissioner Service. And, you know, just thought we'd highlight a couple of key facts about why, you know, why do we care so much about women in international trade? Why does it matter? I know we're preaching to the choir given the group that we're speaking with. We thought we'd just highlight, you know, women-owned businesses that export employ more people. They pay on average 1.5 times more than non-exporting businesses, and they're more productive. And so, you know, at any measure, it benefits both women in the workforce, but also benefits our economic development to have more female-owned companies, women entrepreneurs in international trade. Next slide. Once again, preaching to the choir, but, you know, really this is about having stronger businesses that understand the full diverse range of their customer base and create more competitive products. And it also is about representation. We know that when women are in C-suite positions in companies, there are 8% more women actually employed within that company, because seeing that pathway, seeing that potential for leadership does make a difference. And it's important that we, as an organization, we're really focused on promoting women in international trade and women in entrepreneurship through a variety of programs that we'll talk about in a little bit.
So this is where I chime in, just adding to Erin's comments. So, you know, we've taken, you know, looking through our international feminist policy and inclusive trade mandate, we've taken a good look in terms of the challenges and systemic barriers that underrepresented trading groups like women entrepreneurs, Indigenous-owned businesses, visible minorities, LGBTQ business groups encounter in international trade. And we just thought that it would be interesting to share this slide with you, just to say that you're not alone if you're encountering these difficulties here in the US. And this set of specific data drives us daily in terms of, as a government, developing key policies to support our small, medium-sized businesses within these underrepresented groups, and also at the consulate in terms of developing some proactive business initiatives supporting these clients. And Erin's going to talk a little bit more about it later in the presentation, but we just wanted to, you know, we thought this slide to be interesting. Next slide, please, Faye. And again, very often the way that we're organized is that, you know, we cover, you know, leading key sectors such as proactively, such as life sciences, ICT, agriculture. But what we've noticed as we, drill down in terms of our data is that a lot of these underrepresented groups, such as business, women-led businesses, operate in sectors that are not considered as priority sectors for us. So when we mention that, it's typically, we will hire experts like Erin and Carolyn in specific sector areas. But then, we noticed that a lot of sectors such as the retail trade, accommodation, food, construction, professional services were not that active in terms of, growing a list of strong local contacts and seeking out business development opportunities. And this type of data guides us in terms of just changing our approach and developing programs that are supportive to women businesses like yours. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you an idea of the Canadian trade ecosystem. And in Canada, we really operate like Team Canada. So we've got a number of federal agencies that are listed there that have developed funding, mentoring programs for women-owned businesses, as well as financing programs. And then we work hand in hand with provinces, territories, municipalities, and business-oriented organizations to support companies and their growth in Canada. Next slide, please.
This is a specific one that we talked about before we went onto the webinar. When we talk about women and we pull out the data that Dina just mentioned, one thing of note is that the pandemic has had a huge impact on all of this. No news to anybody probably, but women have been one of the hardest hit group by the pandemic. There are various reports and numbers to show that, but just to give you the one example that everybody's talking about is really the return of women back to the home. And by that, I don't necessarily only mean the home office or working from home, but really taking on the role of caretaker again, be it elderly parents, children, sometimes husbands. But all of that is really something that puts women into a bind when we talk about career growth. And when we then go back to the numbers that Erin had shown earlier, the gender gap, meaning compensation, but also time off, double burden of roles, all of the above have been impacted by the pandemic. Next slide, please. And for those who would like numbers, I know this is a very busy and very small slide, but there are two things to point out. First, the good news. Both Canada and the US are within the top 30 countries when we talk about closing the gender gap or how wide that gender gap is. Canada is number 24, the US is number 30. Now we're talking about the bad news. It's the exact same. It's number 24 and number 30. So what that means is there's a lot of room for improvement, which is why Dina mentioned already at the consulate, and not only there, but the Canadian government in general has the mandate to make sure we contribute to that improvement to close the gender gap. Next slide, please. And by what I mean by that, and here are two examples that showcase Canadian initiatives. One is the Women in Technology Venture Fund. It is run by the Business Development Bank of Canada. It is a $200 million fund, a venture fund, and it's dedicated to women-led technology companies. And it's supposed to help build an ecosystem that supports women in tech, but also in investment. And deriving out of that technology fund is an initiative where our department, Global Affairs Canada, is also involved through the consulates on the West Coast in Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's the Women in Tech California Dreaming Program. And in 2021, we had the third round of that program, so two before that. It ran from March 2 to 4, 2022, and the fourth one is coming up. And it's basically an accelerator that helps promising Canadian small businesses that are women-led to accelerate their international growth, starting with the US. Next slide, please.
So I get the pleasure of talking a little bit more about our team and the areas that we concentrate on here in New England. As we've already mentioned, a big focus for us at the consulate is really helping Canadian companies connect down here in the New England area, whether that be identifying potential buyers. A really key component is potential partners. That can be something as simple as looking for local reps. It can be finding supply chain and manufacturing partners. It can be finding research partners. And then the other key point is access to capital and investment. So we work a lot with Canadian tech entrepreneurs that are looking at identifying potential investors in the New England area. And this is kind of reflected to see in the composition of our team. I'm fairly confident in saying that if we are not the biggest trade team of any of the consular corps in Boston, we're pretty close. We have a pretty decent sized team now rounded out by the inclusion of Dina and Chris, who arrived within the past year. So we cover a variety of industry sectors, and if anyone's interested following this, we certainly can give contact details for some of our team. Next slide, please. So I thought it might just be helpful for everyone if we provide a little bit more context on some of the technology areas that we focus in. Once again, this is where we will organize proactive programs with Canadian companies, but it's also where we proactively go out to the New England community and meet with local companies to understand their needs. One way that we do work with New England area companies is helping them to source Canadian technology, identify Canadian suppliers, or of course, as Carolyn has been speaking about, for companies that are thinking about opening an office and investing in Canada, we have a wealth of information and referrals that we can make for you. So, not, I think, surprise to anyone on this call that, life sciences is a key focus for us at the consulate. That some of the subsectors that we look at where we organize programs is biopharmaceuticals, med devices, drug discovery tools. In traditional years, I would be focusing a lot on some upcoming events and opportunities for anyone on the line who might be interested in these areas to connect with our Canadian clients. COVID has kind of upended some of our plans on that front, but I know that we will be coming into the spring doing more and more in-person events, we hope, and having opportunities to connect, and we certainly can share that information with any of your membership that's interested. As I mentioned, we also cover ICT, which of course is a massive industry in and of itself, but some key areas that we're focusing on for the coming year, EdTech, PropTech or property technology, FinTech, and then we're looking at things like quantum and AI. So Canada actually has a national AI strategy, and they are in the process of implementing a national quantum strategy as well. And that really crosses over with any of the industries that we proactively cover here at the consulate. Certainly in my space, aerospace and defense, we're looking a lot at AI and quantum for those particular end users. Same could be said for life sciences and some other areas. So that really kind of is a horizontal area that we're really focused on. We were talking a little bit earlier about climate and climate commitment, and climate tech is certainly an area that we are focused on, whether that be things like renewables or electrification. We also are working with our colleagues on the policy side of the shop. So most of the folks you see represented on the call today are very focused on trade and working with our Canadian companies, but we do have a policy side of the shop that speaks more with the the New England political delegations, and this is an area with energy which really is very integrated between political concerns and business concerns. Next slide, please. So we have someone covering food and beverage products, and in particular, really focusing on healthy and sustainable products, looking at some of the consumer transformation that we are seeing over the past few years. And that includes things like thinking about marketing yourself on social media and how you sell online. A lot of the traditional ways of selling internationally are really being digitalized. And what does that mean for our companies and how they approach partners and buyers and consumers in the US and abroad. I'm actually the trade officer for defense, aerospace, and ocean technologies, and that is big enough for its own. And I see we have some friends from Vermont on the line that I know we work with quite a bit in that space. But some subsectors that we're really looking at are things like unmanned systems and robotics, advanced manufacturing, in the ocean tech world, marine robotics, but also offshore wind. It's such a huge industry that's going to be developing in this region over the next decade or so, and we're really interested in making connections on that front. And then, as I mentioned, Carolyn, and looking at attracting investment into Canada, particularly investment in various innovation and science technology areas. And I just mentioned, you know, as I said, we are, our equivalent on the US federal government side is the US Commercial Service. And I imagine many of the folks on the line are already in touch with some of our counterparts at the US Commercial Service, but there's certainly a great resource if you're ever looking at trade missions going into Canada. I know they have run a few, and we certainly chat with them about some of those programs when they do them. Next slide, please. So bread and butter of consulates and embassies throughout the world is the traditional trade mission. And I'm sure we've already heard a few folks mention that they have participated in trade delegations, trade missions. Those are usually around a large event, or they're to specific regions where you go for a few days, you make a lot of connections, and then you go home. And those are great. We do a fair number of those in normal times when we're not dealing with COVID. But we realized a few years back that some of those trade missions were not serving our technology entrepreneurs as well as we would like. That there are certain hubs, particularly in the US and in other parts of the world, where you really need to be able to make connections on a deeper level. You need to spend more time, particularly if you're looking to connect with venture capitalists or research partners. And so our department came up with the concept of a Canadian Technology Accelerator. So our Technology Accelerator is, as I said, we have these programs in a few parts of the US, including Boston, New York, and Silicon Valley. And really, it is a 6-month program where we competitively select Canadian emerging tech companies. They're beyond the startup phase. They have a little bit of traction in Canada, some early indications that they're working, but they really need to connect down in the US to grow. We've established this program at 6 months. In normal times, once again, not during COVID, we actually have a space at the CIC in Kendall Square in Cambridge, where we let these companies be residents, and they can spend more proactive time in the market, connecting with partners, refining their business strategy, and really keyly connecting with mentors. We have a mentor network of New England area, a lot of them Canadian expats or friends of Canada who work with these companies to advise them on their business plans, to help make connections for them. And I will throw it out there for anyone that's on the line that might be interested. One area we're interested in increasing both the number of clients that we bring, a number of women-led companies that we bring to our CTA program. We're also looking to increase the number of female mentors we have for these clients. So if anyone is interested in mentoring and working with companies that are coming into this market, we'd love to hear from you, because it's certainly something we're always looking to refresh and grow our mentor network. And it's a great way to connect in with some of these companies. Similarly, for any businesses on the line that might be thinking about partnership and ways that you can work with Canadian companies, these are businesses that have really affirmed their interest in this region. They know that it's a place where they need to be making connections. So they're often very interested in getting out into the local community, expanding their network, meeting with partners. And we will send after this the link to our website where you can find all the information on our past companies that are part of this program. And when we have a new cohort come in the spring, you'll find more information about them as well. And these are just some numbers about the life of the program and the number of companies we've worked with, the amount of capital they've raised. And I think the key message for a lot of the folks online is the number of partnerships created. Next slide. And these are our Boston specific numbers for that. We've worked with about 85 companies since the inception of the program about, oh God, I've been here too long, I think 6-7 years ago now. Next slide, please. These are just some additional local resources, and we wanted to highlight these because we know that some of our Canadian companies that we have been working with have really connected into these local groups. And this is part of what we actually recommend to clients when they're thinking about the New England area, they're thinking about exporting and finding partners here, is to connect with local organizations, to become members of some of these groups, including members of groups like your own, in order to really expand their network and learn more. Next slide. So probably should mention that I think Carolyn showed that great map and the proximity of this region to Atlantic Canada, to Quebec, to Ontario. Our mission is probably more active than some when it comes to new exporters or virtual trade missions. because of that proximity. This is often, New England is often thought of as a natural first market for a lot of the companies that we work with, whether that's because we have a lot of cultural ties or because just the way of shipping networks and cost of exporting works, it just makes a lot of sense for this to be one of the first international markets that Canadian companies explore, and the vice versa is true as well. So I wanted to highlight, we actually have a virtual trade mission that will be coming to Boston starting next week that our colleagues in Nova Scotia are putting together. And if you see the link here, we'll make sure everyone gets a copy of the slides. You actually can find out more about those companies. And if anyone's interested in meeting with any of them, you can book meetings as part of that upcoming mission. This is something that unfortunately is virtual right now, but this is actually an annual initiative that Nova Scotia has been doing for the past few years. Usually they come down in the fall around the arrival of the Nova Scotia tree for the Boston Commons. So I just wanted to highlight that as one of many opportunities for anyone that's on the line that's interested in connecting more with potential Canadian partners. We do a number of events like this, and we're happy to include you in any networking opportunities we have, particularly when it comes to some of our programs that are highlighting female entrepreneurs. We know that forging those connections, identifying those local partners is particularly important. And we hear that message all the time when we speak with the Canadian companies. And so we're eager to connect into networks like yours and find ways that we might be able to forge some of those connections and introduce our companies to some of the folks on the line here today. I think that's it for me. We've been speaking a lot. I would love to hear from the group any questions you might have.
So if you want to, sorry, I'm trying to get my video back on. Okay, there we go. If you want to pose any questions in the chat box, then we can ask, the group. Thank you very much, guys. That was really awesome. And thanks so much for focusing on, women entrepreneurs. And I have been talking to Erin a lot about this in the last couple of weeks, and it kind of blows my mind how much you're doing in that area. And also, I want to say that I do a lot of work with clients in Quebec in particular, and all in the area of innovation. And I know Canadians are not braggadocious, so I'm just going to brag for you. I am really blown away by how much the entire country is focusing on innovation. And I have 40 clients just in aerospace sector, and they, I can barely understand what they're talking about. They're so innovative, and they're all startups, small companies, and incredibly brilliant. And, they're ripe for partnerships with US companies, because the US is really a priority foreign market for them, as it should be. And like you said, vice versa. These are, the best first markets for companies that are just starting to export. So anyway, I do want to, and it's just so funny because every single time I talk to anybody from Canada, the word innovation just comes like you're vomiting innovation. And you're not, I think, promoting that enough. There's actually really, yeah, vomiting. That was a really pretty picture. Okay. But it's actually really exciting because you're our biggest trading partner, and we have to get back to really, we have to compete with Singapore. We've got to get back to focusing on innovation ourselves. So I'm going to ask a quick question about the USMCA, or you call it CUSMA. You mentioned how much of a success NAFTA was, and I can remember back when I was the trade director for the state of New Hampshire. NAFTA was very controversial, and I had just taken the job, but literally threw the companies in the state into a whole different sector in terms of exporting. We actually became the fastest exporters to Mexico of any state in the country. If you can imagine, can you be any farther away from Mexico, except for if you're in Maine? But anyway, I was wondering if USMCA, if you see that as a substantial improvement over NAFTA or not, and what the differences are, and if you do see it as an improvement, why?
Don, thanks for the question. And by any metric, NAFTA was a huge success, and that's interesting that you got a front row seat for those discussions. They were very hot. The party, I'm a liberal, and we ran a campaign against the free trade agreement, and but have certainly embraced it and consider ourselves free traders now, because of the benefit that it's brought to so many people on throughout the Mexico, US, and Canada. But you can only imagine, when they went into the negotiations, it had been 25 years that deal was in place. So when you think back, they would have been using the old fax machine to get information back and forth between those offices. So 25 years later, the fax machine is redundant, as are many aspects of of NAFTA. So it was important to get the document brought into modern times with modern provisions around today's digital economy and all that goes with that. Certainly the two main, Robert Lighthizer, the Trade Commissioner for the US, and Chrystia Freeland, they just worked their tails off on this particular agreement. It was tough, and but of benefit to all involved. I know that in the midst of that, there were steel and aluminum tariffs that sort of went on in the midst of that, and that was difficult as well. But they were able to come forward with a document. And pretty much, essentially, it was very much the same. The provisions were the same as the NAFTA agreement, but it was tweaked. But it was supported. Well, what's most striking, it was supported, had cross aisle support, bipartisan support in the U.S., had support in Canada as well. Conservatives, Liberals supported the document and saw the benefit. And so it's something, there again, as I had said earlier, there'll always be those minor irritants, but Condoleezza Rice said, they're like condominium problems, they're little annoyances more than they are big structural problems. And so, we can sit down, there's a rate, and currently with this administration, there's an open dialogue and a positive dialogue to try to find resolution. And obviously at the end of the day, we have to do, there's an expectation on the part of Canadians that we represent their best interests, as there is on the US side. But again, there's that open dialogue hopefully will steer us toward a path of mutual benefit to both. So I see it as progressive, inclusive, and modernized, and one that will serve all involved well.
Great. I have a question from our audience, but you mentioned the administration, so I'm just going to throw in a question. How are things going with the Biden administration?
We got off to a great start, and developed a roadmap to we align probably. We align on about 85% of the issues. We're shoulder to shoulder, and if you look at the environment, we're very closely aligned. If you look at security, if you look at geopolitical issues, very much aligned. But we know President Biden has got a tough hand to play, and I'm being absolutely frank with you. He gets up in the morning and he knows that 35% of the people in the United States don't believe that he's the rightful president of and shouldn't be in the White House. That's got to be tough. And when he was inaugurated, the nation's capital was locked down. There was an insurrection, the day I arrived in Boston. Those things have to play, and he has to look at every day he goes to the office. He's got what can I do to bring Americans together? What can I do that's not going to light this thing up? So he has to do what he believes is right for Americans. We've seen. We are concerned about the. We have to find a way to resolve the Buy America provisions. We know that American workers have to be the main benefactor of any investment that's being taken place by the government of the United States. But we think that it's simplified to think that Canada doesn't play a role in that supply chain. So it's important that we continue to send that message to elected officials. Same thing with electric vehicles. So yeah, so I think that, you know, again, our nations are aligned, the leaders are very much aligned, but we'll continue to try to hash out these. The current White House is not quite as spontaneous as the past White House, so that's been of benefit, I think, to the relationship, and we'll get things sorted out.
Okay, great. Thanks for being candid. Spontaneous. Oh, that's not what I called it. Okay, I'm not going to go political on you. So Erin already responded to Tracy Horridge, but I just want to mention that she is saying that she has a sister company in Canada that makes a COTS product. And there's a lot of interest in these products by US defense contractors. And we are trying to understand the Canadian import-export regulations as regards these transactions. Where can we find training on the topic? You know, and I'm wondering if that also wouldn't be of use to really drill down on the Buy America acts as regards doing business with Canada, because there are some exceptions there and nobody seems to really understand them. So maybe we should do a special program on that. But anyway, Erin, if you want to just, you know, throw out an answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in the defense context, you know, the U.S. is really governed by ITARs, international traffic and arms regulations, but Canada actually has some special exemptions under ITARs and some programs in Canada that are considered to be equivalent. And I can, you know, it gets very technical, so I didn't want to go into too much detail because it could be a full, as Don says, it could be its own separate presentation, but more than happy to chat with anyone that has questions about that and put them in touch with the appropriate folks to address some of those questions. But just to say, Canada, you know, when it comes to defense procurements, has its own special agreements with the US DoD and has some carve-outs that aren't always well known. And that's certainly something I'm happy to chat with anyone if they have questions about that.
Yeah, I really, yeah, we really need to focus on making that more understandable on both sides, both with US exporters and Canadian exporters. So yeah, we need to do that. So another question is, what has been the the Canada-US cooperation on the COVID response, COVID-19 response?
I'll take that. And Erin, if I could thank you for not going into the weeds on the response to that one, and she's so kind. She knows that she would have lost her boss over that too. But thank God, as I had said earlier, our staff is deep in experience and knowledge in their areas of expertise. So I encourage a follow up with Erin on the issue. On COVID, listen, we're all trying to get through this together. I mean, man, it's been just a bizarre. It's been a bizarre year. I'm here in Wellesley. I'm making my own wine now. Well, really, it's just gin with grape jelly in it. But you know, we've all resorted to our own pastime sort of thing. With the cooperation between, it's amazing that both countries continued to keep the wheels rolling, the trucks moving, and goods back and forth across the border. So both countries have to be commended on that, their border services. I'll tell you just a quick story that there is a huge success story out of the consul office, and Carolyn's here, and some others had, but Moderna was, you know, who centered here in Boston, and the consul office knew that there was research going on in mRNA vaccines, and a cold call from Carolyn just said, you know, what are you guys doing in this realm? And collectively, the globe was holding its breath as to, you know, where are we going to go with this kind of stuff. And she saw an opportunity, brought it to staff, and staff got on it. And my predecessor, Dave Alward, was very aggressive and worked with Canadian officials to knock on some doors, and a couple of instances sort of put the shoulder to a couple of doors to get in and give them an opportunity. And you had talked about the innovation. So we went to the Minister of ISED and were able to get them aligned with people who believed in what they were doing, and allowed them to further invest and come to market. And that's been a real neat success story out of it. But again, there was more than that. There was a sort of a knee-jerk reaction initially about hoarding PPE. And but when you realize, like, there was an issue around N95 masks, and the president of the day didn't want the masks going to Canada. But then when he realized that the pulp for the actual filter, that's all Canadian made. So, the N95 is another prime example of Canadian-US cooperation, and, to the benefit of all people. Bauer, who's up in, Bauer is up in New Hampshire, Exeter, New Hampshire. That's a Canadian company that was founded in 1928, and known for their hockey equipment, what have you. But they shifted gears, and their visors. They made visors for people on the front lines that were battling COVID. So there are a number of those instances, and people banding together across the border, much to the benefit of people on both sides. So it's been a tough old slog. I don't know how many hockey fans you have, in the group here, but I'm an optimist. I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. So, although my emotions have been toyed with since 1967, you just think that, oh yeah, this is our year. And so COVID has been a lot like that, where we thought that, we could see the light, and then Omicron comes, and we sort of get thrown back. But, that being said, I think the cooperation, the number of health professionals that live in Windsor, but staff the hospitals in Detroit, it's incredible. When I was seeing the initial numbers on that, and that's right across our border. We see that in border communities. And so I think, we've been mutually supportive, and to the mutual benefit.
That's great. Some of your comments, led me to think about supply chain, and I'm kind of obsessed with what's going to happen with supply chains because of, China and COVID. And I'm looking at what the Koreans are doing in terms of getting closer to their main markets. I don't feel like we're really paying enough attention to, the new generation in supply chain. So I'm wondering what your perspective might be relative to Canada and, the so-called new generation in supply chain management and development.
So I'm going to take that one, actually, just because Rodger already touched on one of the examples that illustrates very nicely what supply chain disruptions mean and what opportunity they could bear, particularly in the US-Canadian relationship, but globally. We've all seen the beginning of the pandemic without toilet paper. Then we got a tanker stuck in the Suez Canal. All of that to make us aware of something that we have sort of ignored over the last 30 years, meaning supply chain disruptions. And if you talk to manufacturers, the big just-in-time production and delivery, that anything lean management to whatever occasion, any theory you would touch on, that's what was the target: low inventory and get it out the door as quickly and as fast and efficiently as possible. That has changed. We're now looking at supply chains that are globally integrated, but definitely the burger showed that, but also automotive shows that, aerospace shows that. Everything is integrated, and particularly within the US and Canada, it's integrated. Yet at the same time, as Rodger said earlier, we had challenges when it came to crisis management, as simple as PPE, but also vaccines. We are looking at this now from a global perspective. And to go back to the Moderna example, the latest success story, and this is where the opportunities come into the game to recovery and building back better. Moderna is now, or has just announced, to build a vaccine plant in Canada. Why? Because not only is it good for Canada, and that's always the best opportunity when it aligns and matches strategy and demand, but it's also a model for global structuring, meaning the Canadian model will serve as a global rollout for Moderna. And that's just one of those examples. There are others, and really looking at supply chains that create redundancies that are closer to the customers. So the cluster building closer to the customers will be keywords, nearshoring. Then we're back to the talent pipelines that are extremely important, the innovation that drives all of this. So we're really looking at a disruption that has been accelerated over the last 2 years, but that at the same time, and please, I don't want to downplay the pandemic at all, but it also has created opportunities that we're now looking at that make us and companies rethink and look at global demand when it comes to public health, but also when it comes to climate goals. When we talk about climate goals, that Canada has very ambitious goals here, but so do other countries, including the US as well. They can only be accomplished when we look at integration of supply chains. To give you one last example, and then I'm going to turn it back to other speakers, critical minerals is one thing that Canada is particularly looking at because of the EV battery supply chain, from mines to mobility. Canada is the only country that has all those critical minerals needed to produce those batteries and to then accomplish the climate goals. So you can tell it's all integrated, it's all complex, but it's also a great opportunity for Canada, for North America, and for the global economies.
Well, maybe that would be a great point to start when it comes to actually creating policy. So we can actually move forward with EV and other infrastructure needs because we're next to each other. So I don't know. That just seems like a great place to start. I had no idea that you had that asset. So I think I'm going to finish with a sort of a generic question, but I think it's a great topic. Obviously, we know, or we should know, that if you're a first-time exporter from the US, that Canada is your most opportune market, and vice versa. If you're a first-time exporter from Canada, you want to go into the US. You talked about New England, which is, awesome, being an obvious choice. Do you have any advice in that regard for first-time exporters or importers?
Don, thank you. I will take that question. So, I mean, what obviously transpired from our presentation today is that the US is the preferred first market entry for most of our Canadian and US exporters. That's why the renewal of CUSMA was so important. We share a $1 trillion trade and investment relationship. USMCA has lifted 99% of tariffs for the exports of goods and services, simplified paperwork at the border, and introduced new chapters in digital trade, labor, rules of origin related to auto to increase our North American global competitiveness. Now, COVID-19 has presented significant challenges similar to what we've seen here in the US, particularly on the health, tourism, hospitality, supply chains, but it's also created new opportunities for export promotion. So we've witnessed a surge in demand of PPE, health IT, telemedicine, senior care solutions, contactless payments, remote education, virtual fitness, food service, logistics, last mile delivery, you name it, e-commerce, online groceries. Canadians are very digital savvy. So when I used to lead our office down in Silicon Valley, we visited Facebook pretty regularly, and we were always listed as the #1 top user of their digital platforms. Same with Google.
Wow.
So whenever you think of Canada, think of us as, really charging the way in terms of digital platforms and, being savvy on the social media front for sale purposes. Now we see COVID-19 it's been a catalyst for accelerating digitization and automation. So we expect more adoption of AI and robotics, greater e-commerce penetration, growth of the Internet of Things, blockchain, cybersecurity, telecom, green mining, electric vehicles, clean energy. And I'm so happy you brought up and highlighted our innovation strength, because all of these opportunities are kind of fueled in these new innovative sectors. As part of our COVID-19 economic recovery plan, we're rebuilding, increasing our infrastructure with a special focus on broadband in rural areas, 5G deployments, circular economy, smart and connected cities. When we showed you that map that was really busy, you know, one interesting stat is that 95% of our Canadian population lives within an hour of the border with the US.
Yeah.
But, you know, obviously we have a commitment from a diversity and inclusion perspective to serve our rural economies, rural economies. So we're quite focused on that front. We encourage you to continue to grow your business networks by connecting with the US Commercial Service in Canada, Canadian Chambers of Commerce, business associations. There's a significant number of US Fortune 500 companies in Canada with supplier diversity programs. We have a number of women certification bodies, such as We Connect and We Bank Canada. These connections can help you qualify as a supply diversity contractor. In terms of banking, all of our Canadian, top 5 banks have a presence here in the US, with obviously TD right here in Boston.
Right.
We have a lot of free trade agreements. We speak a lot of languages, and we have friendly immigration policies. So if you open an office in Canada, then you're considered a client of ours, and you have access to our network, Canadian financing opportunities, good websites to look at. For information is our own website, the tradecommissioner.gc.ca website, and tarifffinder.ca. We're connectors, always happy to open doors. I hope you took away from this presentation that we are deeply passionate to supporting women-owned businesses. And I'm so pleased to join your network, and please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, it's really a shame, Dina, that you're not more passionate about what you do.
Don, if I could, because I have to jump on another call here. I'm just seeing Leslie Griffin had tweeted out, a comment about our gathering here today, and the picture of me beside the cheeseburger. I know I'm going to get chirped by some of my buddies to be shared with the cheeseburger. So Leslie, thanks for that. But I do want to extend an invitation to the group. Although it's hard to believe now, hopefully the snow in my backyard will be gone within a couple of months, and that we'll be able to host you out here at the residence. And the staff will tell you, at least they've been instructed to tell you, that I make a great seafood chowder, and we'd love to have you folks out. And so thanks for your time today. But I do have to jump on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for your time and for the invitation. I think we're talking about maybe late summer, early fall, and that would just be amazing to have a networking event at your residence. Taste your chowder. From one liberal to another. I look forward to talking to you more. So jump on your call, and thank you again so much for joining us, Consul General.
Thanks so much.
Okay. So I just want to finish up with saying that I think that it's quite obvious that there's a really amazing partnership in the works with the Canadian Consulate and Women in World Trade New England. So I'm really looking forward to really establishing something very, we already have, a great relationship, but some very special programs that, focus on women in trade. And I am instructed to bring this program that's on the screen to your attention, which is a great program, GBAIN, February 16th, focusing on climate change and its implications for business. Some great speakers, including someone who was at the COP, COP 26, is that what it was? Program. So hopefully you will sign up for that. That's coming up quickly. And I think we sent some, email invitations for that. We will make the slides from today available. That's okay, right, Dina and Aaron? Yeah, to everybody, because a lot of people asked for that and for the links. We have just in terms of women in world trade housekeeping, we have a a lot of great programs coming up, a lot of country specific and various programs. So watch our website. We have some other announcements that we'll be making soon. And look at your inbox for information and announcements from us. So I want to thank Dina, Aaron, Carolyn for an amazing I know you worked very hard on this presentation. Thanks for getting the Consul General. I actually can't wait to meet him in person. And actually, yeah, you guys too, except for Aaron. I've known you for forever, but I really think it's going to be amazing to have a the networking event at his home. I guess can't wait to get back to doing things in person. Anyway, thank you so much. Yeah, so I guess it's time to sign off. So great.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.